welcome to the Erica Show. I'm your host, Erica from Crypto Soul, and I talk to the top builders and leaders in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. So today in episode 35, we dive into the fascinating topic of decentralized autonomous organizations, social tokens, community tokens, and so forth. So I'm so excited to have Jess with me, Jess Sloss from Seed Club, and Jess is the instigator of Seed Club, an organization dedicated to help creators and communities. So I'll let Jess do the intro, but thank you, Jess, for being here. Hi.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this episode, and I'm so very stoked to learn about what you're doing and about social tokens, and yeah, very excited to dive in. But beforehand, I'm sure there's people who are curious, but they don't know much about your background, where you're from, and it'd be great to have a short introduction before we dive in.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jess, and I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, or at least a small town just outside of that. So, yeah, pretty blessed to be up here. I've been in and around the crypto space since 2017, worked on a few projects, but I guess have always kind of been fascinated with the digital transformation of the economy, and was really early into social media, worked in the music business for a little while. Oh. Just always found myself fascinated by how technology was changing how we work. And I think there's no bigger technology or shift that's happening right now, or maybe has happened in the last 20 years before the internet, other than crypto, and to have an impact on how we make a living and grow our economy. So that's kind of what got me into the space. And for the last, I guess, almost a year now, we've been working on Seed Club, and it's been an absolute pleasure of a project to be a part of.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, I've been in the space since 2017, so we're buddies. Yeah, it's been a very cool ride for all of us, I think. And, Seed Club is definitely one of the things that really stands out these days, especially. And what inspired you to start Seed Club, and, how did it all come together? Because because from my experience, my little experience about DAOs, I would say, or social tokens or anything, I'm very, very shallow when it comes to that. But still, from my perspective, it's kind of difficult to get all together in a very tight knit. I mean, how did it all come together? Because I'm very curious about how that all started.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like any good crypto project, I think it started with a Telegram group. So I think around in August of last year, there had been over the course of early 2020, I think a number of people that were launching social tokens. So personal tokens, I think is what they were called mostly at the time. Peter Pan did one of those, Matthew Vernon with Boy, Ruben Bremenathan with his council token. These are tokens that were kind of exchanged for time or some sort of value from an individual. And then we started to see broader use cases, usually from Alex with his Alex token, raising money so you can go and build a career in San Francisco, or the Jam token that was more of like a tokenized access to a Discord, or in Brian's case, to a newsletter. And so I think it was this idea of so it started because I had a number of friends who launched social tokens, and we were all talking about the same things. So we came together in a Telegram group. But I think the insight of why it was exciting to me specifically was I saw there was 3 really accessible building blocks that all of a sudden allowed individuals to have ownership in communities. And so that's AMMs, the easy ability to mint new tokens, and then the ability to token gate access to a community channel or Discord or Telegram. And so that really captured my attention, and really just wanted to learn faster than anybody else. And so we brought a bunch of smart people together, and it kind of escalated quickly from there. We ended up running I guess the idea of sort of a social token incubator spun out of that. And so we ran our first cohort, we ran a hackathon, we ran a bunch of community events. And over the last 11 months, I think we've gone from 11 members in a Telegram group to 63 DAO members and just over 3,000 community members that are, I think, in our Discord, but many, many more who engage with us across multiple different projects. We've backed 17 projects. And are gearing up to do our next cohort. I think applications will open up next week. So a lot of fun stuff happening.
Wow, it seems very organic. And I also joined the Discord group, and it's very inviting and very educational. So I think it is the best way to start, this organic group. And Wow. This is great timing for the interview because next week you're going to have the next applications. But as you mentioned about the cohorts, right? How does Seed Club work? I mean, from the name itself, it just seems like very intuitive where you kind of grow the seed into like make it blossom and just help them grow. But like, how does it work usually? How does the rounds work, the cohorts work? I'm very curious about that as well.
Yeah, I think like the core of Seed Club is our community, and that's our the broad membership, and then also our collaborators, which are some of the leading thinkers, builders, makers across the crypto space. And so I guess the insight was that if we came together and worked closely with folks who are trying to build at the edges, that we would be able to both be impactful, hopefully create some value, and learn faster than anybody else. And so right now, as we stand, we have sort of three main focus areas. The first is our accelerator, which is what we'll be kicking off our third group for. I guess it'll formally kick off in the beginning of September. Mm-hmm. So we work with, try to choose the best projects that exist out there that are looking to use tokens. I think our core thesis is that tokens give communities superpowers, and there's still a lot to be figured out about how exactly to unleash those superpowers, and that's really the work we want to do. And every time we bring the smartest people together to figure out how they can use tokens for their communities, we get some pretty impressive results, and I think that's what we really aim for with our accelerator. So that's like a 6-week program, a couple sessions a week, really great collaborative environment for communities to go from 0 to 1 with bringing tokens into the world. Those are everything from NFTs to ERC20s. We think about it pretty holistically. We also run a studio program, so we work with brands or other communities that maybe have a bit of a larger reach or further along in their development, and work with them to use tokens again to create some value. I think the idea of giving ownership to community members is a big thing that a lot of community leaders are really excited about, and sort of this move from Web 2 to Web 3. And so we help guide that in a much more of a done with you, hands-on approach. And then our final piece is our community, which I think you're part of, and so you'll see this. You probably see an early transition to what will be probably much more like a token gated access learning environment for people who are exploring this transition from Web 2 to Web 3. We like to sort of create learning experiences where people learn through doing. And our most recent project is M Club, which is a mirror ecosystem DAO. It was really spun up with the idea of allowing people, giving people an opportunity to go from 0 to 1 with a DAO. So starting off from day one, how do we set that up? What does it feel like? What does that mean to lower the barriers, I guess, to participation?
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of different things that you do. But it's I think the second one was talking about brand. Is it the brand tokens? Is it the category? Because I saw your last interview and I kind of learned from the categorization. I mean, it's still a little fuzzy to me. Like, so there's like the brand tokens, community tokens, and they all go into social tokens. Like I was the categorization and definition are, I think, especially for like, I think in the Asian community where we're trying to translate all this into Korean, for example, I think we find it difficult to like really categorize it and define it in our own heads, right? So it would be nice to kind of have a clear, it's hard to clarify it because it is still in the building process, right? And the definition is still pretty, I guess, flexible and open. But in your experience, how would you kind of categorize it or just define it? I think social tokens in general, and just kind of we can go down from there. Sure. Maybe DAOs too. So many. I think
I can imagine the translation would be challenging because I don't think we have great definitions yet in any of these things. So they're just kind of stand-ins. So I think social tokens for me is usually a token that represents social capital, reputation, some sort of other value. So from a personal standpoint, that could be anything from services, but mostly maybe like people making bets on the future success of somebody, like in Alice's case. For brand tokens, I think it's trying to represent like this like brand value, the demand and interest and value that a community might put on, say, access or on sense of belonging or participation. So imagine Supreme having a token, and one way to actually get access to the best stuff is to be the biggest Supreme fan, and the biggest Supreme fan probably just has the most amount of, or has earned the most amount of Supreme tokens. And the projects that we're mostly interested in are community tokens, and so those are most often representing ownership in a community, and that can be, a simple example would be what the Friends with Benefits community has done. By no means simple in what they're executing on, but the idea is pretty simple. Where you are holding a certain number of tokens to be able to access a community, and there will only ever be 1 million of these tokens, and therefore you sort of have an ownership stake in this community, and the more value that gets created, or that you help to create, theoretically, the more value that exists in those tokens as well. So I think those are like maybe the simple definitions. We use social token just to capture the entire category. I didn't mention NFTs, though I think with the sort of PFP excitement that's going on in avatar projects generally, like it's probably pretty fair to include NFTs as part of that definition as well. So still very, I feel like I get more nuanced every single week, maybe, around how to describe them. And so I don't think that's useful for anybody who needs to translate, but oh, well, sorry.
No, I think like I've been in the community space for quite some time as well. And the more I try to define it, it's kind of impossible to do it. Like when people ask me what I do, it's just like, I cannot really tell in one sentence, like what I do as in a community, as a community builder, for example. So I totally understand.
Community is definitely not one of those words, right? Which means one thing to some people and a whole other thing and everybody misuses it, and everything's a community. And so, I don't know. I think like anything in crypto, that you kind of just have to experience it to understand the difference. And so anybody sitting on the outside going like, what is a social token, or why would I want to own an NFT? Right. Like, you're not going to figure it out until you go do something with it. And so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to do it and just step in, and then you can see a whole realm of, and then you can just learn by doing. So I think that's how you enter crypto in general.
And I think with like these social tokens, there's even more nuance to it, where so much of the value, so much of the value of a token is actually tied into pretty tough to define or logically understand value, right? So it's, I tell a story of an early project that I sort of worked with that's in the Rally ecosystem. Had a conversation with the creators, a musician, and after it, he sent me a couple $100 worth of his creator coin, and it was just like it was like a gift. It was a token of appreciation. I didn't ask for it. There's no requirement to give it to me, but it felt nice to receive it. It's like the person was recognizing my time and effort in a way that money didn't feel the same as like if he paid me $150 or whatever. Right. Of course, over the course of a few months, the value of that went up to thousands of dollars. But I still had this I never considered selling it, and so I think there's there's a bunch of nuances and emotional connection to tokens in a way that, and not everybody has it, but in a way that it definitely doesn't exist with something like, I was going to say Bitcoin, but some people really love their Bitcoin. Right. So
they don't really sell it. Like it's a part of their, it's like a sell. It's a part of the sell. So it's hard to sell. Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying, because as the value appreciates and I see it appreciating, but still I don't want to pull out or anything like that. I don't think about it. I just think about the value of that project itself growing, and I just feel like very happy to see that. But like monetizing is not an option at that time. It's kind of appreciating my involvement in that project, right? And it's a very unique feeling that you never had when we were being paid in fiat. It's a very special feeling to have. And that's how we kind of fall into this attractive space, especially in social tokens and community tokens as well. So DAOs are, another definition time, but DAOs, before we, go into more details, right? In your experience, right? I'm sure you've experienced a lot of things, but how did you find it in terms of like the advantageous traits that come out of it, or just kind of, it can be good or bad, but just in your own experience, how did you find it as well? That's very curious.
Yeah, I think DAOs are sort of going through a redefinition period right now in many ways. So, I mean, the term decentralized autonomous organization, and most notably, I think it was sort of core to a big hack that happened back in 2016 with the
Yes.
DAO. And I think the underlying idea is like, can we use smart contracts to to evolve the corporation, and can we have more autonomous participation? So either smart contracts or individuals that are sort of being incentivized by smart contracts to create value and earn a share of the value that they create. I think so. You're seeing most of the DAOs in application today, like in the DeFi space, where many of these organizations through token holders are governing networks. So something like a Uniswap or a Balancer or a Compound. These, or in NFT space, the Rarible DAO. These are token holders having a say over what gets done within a protocol or a platform. So I think that's like they have the biggest treasuries. They're sort of like I guess what most people refer to as DAO. I think what we're seeing right now is sort of an evolution of DAOs into the more of the social space. So I think I called them social clubs earlier today, but these are DAOs where you still have token holders, and token holders are kind of acting as a governing body within these communities. They're voting on proposals, most often coming through Snapshot. So their token holdings equal a vote in in sort of governance decisions. And ultimately, I think the best description of DAOs in this sense are like communities with a balance sheet and a bank account. And tokens are sort of the way that and a governance process are the way that people make decisions in these groups. So as far as like why would you want one, or what's advantageous about them, like it reduces a ton of friction as far as collaboration internationally with people you may or may not know, but you all have sort of similar alignment or skin in the game. So most often what will happen is there will be some sort of distribution of tokens, and those tokens represent voting share or governance share, or like a share of voice in a community. And there'll be a place for collaboration like Discord or Discourse, and a mission of some sort. And then the idea is that can you create incentives and enough alignment that people want to work together to go towards that mission. So Seed Club is set up as a DAO. We have a mission of building a valuable organization that helps launch valuable social tokens, and we earn a piece of the tokens that we help launch. And so all of our sort of coordination efforts and voting and governance rights are all designed to steward this organization and the value that we create towards our ultimate mission. The downsides are many as well. It's a complicated thing. It can look like chaos if you hop into a Discord. You can be like, what is going on here, and how do I even participate? And there's any number of things that need to be built and figured out still. But I think people are really excited about, it's in my belief, the communities are the natural evolution of corporations. I think we will, we are creating a ton of value on the internet already as loose-knit communities, and I think adding tokens to the mix just creates a whole lot of really exciting opportunities. And DAOs are like the governing process that will enable those communities to really be effective. And yeah, just excited by the resurgence and interest and energy in the space right now.
Right. This is a very personal question, but it's just because when I think of, the coordination process, right, and the governance structure, I think DAOs are fascinating, but like when it comes to decision making, and you have to make a very sudden decision, is it difficult? I mean, doesn't it take time? Like, is there a timeline when it comes to coordinating all the members together? Because it's a lot of members, and is that one of the, I guess, not current downsides that you face these days? Because I mean, the space is moving so fast, so I would assume that it might be sometimes frustrating to get them all together. Just kind of.
So I think one of the beliefs in DAOs previously was that it was about consensus building, and it was about the hive mind, and it was about all getting aligned in the same direction. And I think the reality is that it just isn't practical, especially for early stage projects. And so I think what the best projects are doing are getting really good at resourcing smaller teams to go do to have agency and delivery on things. And so, and I think there's most of these projects will go through a process of progressive decentralization, if we want to call it that, where there's a core team that's probably involved early on in some way. There's definitely leaders that are involved and people who take responsibility in these communities. And it's those folks that are really, ultimately turned to for many of the decisions early on. I think the reality is most people who are involved in DAOs are involved in a very tangential way. They like to be a part of it because it's fun and exciting, and there's a lot of opportunity in there, but many people are involved in multiple different organizations. And so there's a ton of different ways people can be involved, and not all of them require sort of like a deep level of participation on a day-to-day basis. So I think the governing structures of these organizations are reflecting that, where either core team members will have more say, or at the very least they have more default authority to move things through, and that trust. So I think that's actually a big point. There's a lot of trust that's still required in these communities, and that's actually, I think, actually a huge benefit, because it allows them to move a lot faster. And so in many ways, we're trying to scale trust, and we do that through smaller working groups. So most DAOs will have working groups or squads or committees that are doing certain activities, and they have resources or budgets from the broader group. Yep. Most DAOs or communities that we work with run on like a seasonal process, where there's like a short period of time where certain goals are being set and resources allocated for. So one of our projects called Squiggle DAO is in the process of rolling out its first season. It's called Season Green. And there's a set of sort of agreed upon outcomes that we're working towards and budgets that work towards it. And that creates sort of a dynamic where you can get better at, resourcing and strategy in a shorter cadence. And also at the same time pushes most of the decision-making, value distribution to the edges of folks who are, taking responsibility and moving things forward on a daily basis.
Wow, so fascinating. Very interested in this topic. And in the previous interview, you mentioned that there will be billion-dollar communities on the internet. That was like kind of blasting out. I was like, wow, this, I totally agree. And it's, of course, right now it's the nascent stage, but I think it's definitely on the right way. And as you mentioned, communities, are like the new form of, I guess, corporations. They're, evolving form, and eventually they'll become like communities. I think corporations can break down into communities, like a broader perspective. But so in order for a community to actually have value, produce outcome, how would you say? It can be financial, but it can also be non-financial. But what does it take to create actual value in community tokens? Because I think for a community to launch a community token, right? I think for me, for example, I'm hesitant to, launch my crypto soul token, for example, and I would love to, but I want to be sure that I want to produce the right values, right? And I don't want to seen as like a, how to say, just a shallow community, for example, like that does not think too deep. What kind of advice would you give to this type of, I guess, concern? And just curious. Yeah.
So I think it's like a very reasonable concern, and one that everybody should be thoughtful of. I think like it's very easy to launch a token, but the answer to your question of how do you create a token with long-term lasting value is we don't know, right? Like it's still very, very early. And so I think the right type of community to launch a token today is one that really sees this as an exciting, new way, new innovation, something that they are very values aligned with, and really see themselves as, leading explorers or innovators in the space, and will be committed to it over. I mean, you put a token out into the world and people put their money into it, it's there forever in some form, right? And so it shouldn't be something that's taken lightly, and it's definitely something that, most of our usually when I talk to creators, I try to convince them not to launch a token. And only once they fight me do I say, okay, cool, we'd like to work with you. And our business model is really built around, we earn tokens and become partners in these projects. And so I believe our biggest value will be in curating great projects moving forward, and people will hold on to the club token because of the brand that we have built and the tokens that we work with. And so we want to make sure that we're working with really great projects. So all that said, I think there's a couple of really interesting angles of where social tokens are creating value. So I think we can look at the most recent hype cycle and see projects like Dogecoin and SafeMoon. These are all I guess being called meme-fi in some way. And so this idea of brands or memes having value, I think is pretty clear. I think the Doge NFT sold for 7 figures at some point, and there's obviously a ton of value in these culturally relevant media types. And so I think there's a world where people will see value through just association, through a broad sense of community and a sense of belonging, and maybe just a sense of wanting something to exist in the world, and the tokens will hold value for that. I think, the whole GameStop, Wall Street Bets world is also a version of this. I think you could, I think right. the idea of, that community has created billions of dollars worth of financial impact. And so, sure. You can imagine if they had a token, like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but I think there's like, people will want to identify with being a Wall Street Bets member in some way. And so I think there's value there. I do think that many of these communities will start to generate on-chain revenue. I think that's what NFTs kind of unlock in many ways. So the ability to create something and sell it and earn revenue on chain is key. If you're running a DAO or a tokenized community, and the value that you're governing is all on chain value, the ability to actually generate revenue on chain is a pretty big unlock. So I think we'll see business models like subscriptions. I think crowdfunding becomes a big thing as teams, you can imagine communities wanting to spin up separate communities or initiatives to go in and do certain things that are valuable to that community. And I also think like we see some really exciting developments from teams like Mirror.xyz that are building interesting business models, like the ability to mint a blog post as an NFT, and then a sort of a widget that allows the early backers and the biggest backers of those blog posts to have almost like a sponsored piece of content or sponsorship or advertisement on the post. And I think that's kind of interesting as well. And we'll probably see a lot of media DAOs that are using those primitives to generate revenue. So yeah, and I think also in many ways that there's a lot of other composable tools that are being built on Ethereum that do have really strong business models to them. And I think like DeFi is exciting. And I think the next level unlock comes when communities and start to sort of integrate DeFi into them, so that they are like I think the biggest challenge with crypto is that most people go like, what the heck do I do with? Like, I don't get it. It's confusing, and just shut it off. We know that it takes one or two more beats to be able to really, understand why this is actually really novel and interesting, but most DeFi protocols haven't earned the right to have that sort of attention on the internet. And I think many celebrities or influencers or communities have earned that right, and will ultimately be like the introducers to a whole lot of different DeFi tools that I think we're really excited about, but are still pretty big barriers to adoption right now. So, and I think there'll be revenue generated from that as well. So I see enough examples of ways for communities to be valued both on belonging and participation and sort of the memic value, along with early indications of different revenue sources, and then the belief that we're still so early in figuring all this out, that there's just no doubt in my mind that there's a ton of opportunity and true value here for community tokens.
Well, thank you for the insight. It means a lot, because I think it just really comes out of your experience, and it really does. Because I can learn so much from it. You mentioned a few projects, but what are some of the outstanding, some of the projects that you feel like are really that kind of has an ideal, standard or structure when it comes to these type of projects? Can you name a few that kind of sticks out of your mind? Yeah,
so I think I mentioned Friends with Benefits earlier. Yeah. It's a project that Seed Club itself isn't directly involved in, but we've been very, very supportive of, really excited about what they've built there. And I think it is probably the standout example of one of these social DAOs or social token projects. Not only do they have a just super active Discord and exciting online community. I host a conversation there every Thursday afternoon about social tokens, and it's always well attended. But they've also branched out into real life events. So if you were in Paris or in Miami and you were a token holder, you could get access to a party that other people wouldn't be able to otherwise. Right. They have an NFT marketplace and a lot of fun things there. And I know the team's working on some really other exciting sort of products, experiences, etc. So I always use them as an example. also really excited about Squiggle DAO. It's a project that we helped incubate, where it's the idea is you have to hold at least one Chromie Squiggle, which is an art blocks generative on-chain art piece. Did a sort of a novel airdrop method to get the initial voters on, and then has since built up a treasury of almost $1 million worth of squiggles through people contributing directly into the treasury and earning governance tokens back in exchange. And really excited to see that team spin up committees, and they're voting on their first season plan right now. And I think we'll see a lot more out of that group in the next little while. Last week, we launched a new project that sort of spun out of Seed Club called M Club or Mir Club. And it's a grant giving DAO focused on the Mir ecosystem. So we see Mir.xyz giving creators a whole lot of tools to be able to go from Web 2 to Web 3 to start to build these on-chain organizations. And we just wanted to both give our members an opportunity to learn and go from 0 to 1 with DAOs, but also create some value and collect and back really great projects in the Mir ecosystem. It's also spinning out of a media DAO, which, looking at my Discord here on the side here, it's just the channels light up. People are really excited. Lots of work's being done, and it's just got really great vibes to it. I think what Carlos and team at Forefront are building is really exciting. So Forefront.news, sort of like a CoinGecko meets TechCrunch with like a whole community DAO that's behind it. It's pretty exciting. So people can go and notably there, they can earn tokens to get ownership in Forefront through doing bounties. So it's a really great onboarding process that they built there. Global Coin Research is another one. It's a media organization focused on the broader cryptocurrency space, and Joyce has been doing some really great work there.
Big fan of Joyce.
Yeah, Joyce is amazing, and I think she's just really trying some really novel things using sort of rewarding LP token holders with deal access or access to a tighter knit community, which I think is really exciting. And I mean, we have a whole host of other, one of the things that we really encourage our teams to do is to take their time with launching tokens. And so I think there's another 5 or 6 that are still in the works that we're really excited about, but that aren't out in the world just yet. I think one that's probably super close is Jump, which is a brand marketing focused community. So if you're a Fortune 1000 brand marketer, that is the place for you. The belief there is that, as social media, we went from Web 1 to Web 2, brands were given this idea that they could go build content and build direct relationships with their consumers. And then Facebook was like, actually, you should just buy ads and you don't get any organic reach, and their business changed significantly. But there's, I think there's a ton of creativity and desire to experiment. And so there's billions of dollars worth of budgets that are ready to be deployed into novel marketing opportunities. And Jeff and the Jump team see that their opportunity is helping to guide those folks to step into Web3 in a value-added way. So there's just like, half dozen other awesome projects that are working. So I think if you look at the space right now, you might go, what's going on over there? And I think pretty quickly, it's just going to be like an explosion of awesome projects everywhere you look. It would be a project for anybody out there, whether you're interested in, I don't know, bicycles or brand marketing or whatever. We don't have a bicycle project yet, but I'm sure there'll be one.
I'm sure everything's going to pop up very easily and quickly. I think there is I guess, an obstacle for, the Korean community, and I think everyone's very excited and they want to learn about it. I think language barrier is definitely there, but there's so much going on. I think in general with the crypto space, but still in the DAO space, it's growing explosively, right? So it's sometimes intimidating to kind of jump into it and just kind of see how it is. I think, but it'd be really nice to have more exposure in the Asian communities so that people can really jump into it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because obviously language barriers are such a big thing. I think we're seeing definitely a lot of interest and some early examples there, but none that that we've been deeply involved in yet. And I'm very eager to. We have some great investors that are pretty active in the Asian ecosystem, and so we're still talking with them to think through how we can actually collaborate more broadly. But you let me know when you see something cool, because I'm not in Korea and you are.
Will do. And also in Vietnam, so I might jump back and forth. Yeah.
Nice.
So Oh, you should come sometime. The COVID situation is bad there. But anyway, I actually, I sent out a notice on my channels in Korean that I'm interviewing you. There's been some questions. I mean, people are so excited, by the way. And one of the questions was about the DeFi education fund. Maybe you know about it. Are you aware of it? Yeah. And there's been some recent, sells. And I mean, what's your response to? I mean, how would you react to it? Just, I think people are curious about your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be careful of what I say because I don't think I'm the most educated on the dynamics of Uniswap governance, but I think it does speak to like the challenges of operating in organizations like this, where both you want to sort of the sense of the I guess leadership that wants to push something through, and then also a big gap between what the community itself wants. And I think my read on it was mostly that the community felt like their concerns weren't addressed, and it was kind of rushed. And so this idea of like why do we have a governance process if we're not going to be considered? And I think that's been the critique of the Uniswap governance process for a long time. But I also sort of sympathize with the folks running these projects because there's a lot of fear around giving up that control too early, and I think it's well-founded fear in many ways, and that there's a lot of risks in just across a number of different attack vectors to sort of open it up. So I think it probably could have been handled a lot better. I think it's definitely sort of a gray mark on the governance process of Uniswap. I think we should look towards I think maybe a counterpoint is to see what's been happening in the SushiSwap community with the latest sort of VC round opportunity and the conversation and how that was happening out loud. And so I think there's just a ton of value if we do take the time to engage in the governance process. And I think that's like such an exciting thing to think that a lot of daylight will be brought towards how these organizations are funded and operated. And I think that's something we should strive for. And governance is hard, and we're just trying to figure it all out. And I think the through line for me is just like and it's hard to live by, but how do you over communicate and engage with your community as best as possible? Yeah. And but it's impossible to overestimate the difficulty of doing that sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree. You mentioned just about my next question about SushiSwap. What's your take on it? I mean, it's been, I think from day one, SushiSwap was very focused on the community. I mean, it was very communicative, and but yeah, the recent move was very interesting. I think people were very pleasantly surprised in certain ways, but what's your take on that as well? Just curious. Can you elaborate more?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it was, it really felt like a transition from one way of doing business to a whole other one. And I think, in many ways, it's probably the way I would define SushiSwap is it's just been like an orthogonal approach to pretty much everything, despite, well, maybe not everything. They did sort of just fork Uniswap, but to at least how they went about building their business. And so, yeah, I think there's, for a number of reasons, most financing deals are done behind closed doors. That's both pragmatism and also regulatory challenges that exist with that. And I think it's really exciting that SushiSwap exists in a way that can really lean into both, a governance process that exists that requires these things to be done out in public and get voted on, and also sort of an organizational structure that allows for that sort of isn't super concerned with some of the regulatory challenges that might exist in other businesses or DAOs. So absolutely love it. I think the idea of VCs or investors needing to pitch projects on taking their money is transformational, because I think what you saw there was a number of VCs trying to prove to a community that they are value add, and the community just kept saying, okay, these are your words, but can you prove it to me? And the reality is they can't prove it to you. And so the only way that we'll probably be able to prove it to DAOs is through demonstrating through on-chain actions, right? So you're going to see VCs turn over their wallet addresses and say, hey, look, this is what we've done. This is how we've been active. And so there's this reputation that's going to be made visible. And I think that sort of sunlight is absolutely net positive to the space, and it's going to terrify a lot of people and organizations. And I think I see much of like the hype and activity from some large investors in the space right now, partially driven by this idea that at some point they might be having a more difficult landscape for which they need to compete in, and are trying to move quickly today to capture some of that value that they can.
Wow. Yes. It was, I think it shocked the Korean community as well, in a good way, of course, but it's a very innovative approach in that sense. But thank you for the insight. I think a lot of people just want to hear your thoughts on certain recent topics that are sometimes controversial, but I think it's good to hear your insights and to learn from it. So thank you so much. I think we've covered a lot of the definition parts, but in terms of Seed Club, how do you? I mean, you're still growing, of course, explosively, but are there any other plans to further grow and expand the ecosystem? That it might be in later 2021 or just maybe next year. I mean, COVID has really, deterred a lot of the offline activities, but in your perspective, just kind of curious about your future plans.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're under a year old and have just barely got started. So we've, I think what's so interesting about these types of organizations is that we are stronger because of the network that we are active in. And so, there are a number of initiatives that we will be rolling out, both within our community. So really doubling down on more educational opportunities, really trying to improve the value that we're able to create for the projects that we work with, to continue to push forward really novel use cases that expand the understanding of what's possible with social tokens. So we're really excited about that. We also have some media plans, so keep an eye out for a podcast and some other fun events that we're working with. So yeah, that should be fun. But I think the exciting part is really thinking through how we get to collaborate with other organizations, or even create new organizations with other organizations. And so I think you'll see where we see there an opportunity to build open source tools that enable community tokens or communities to use tokens to their full advantage. We'll be very active in trying to bring those tools to the world, and have a couple underway right now. And then just generally want to be, I think we're sort of in this. So when the NFT craze hit, like in earnest in February, I found myself sort of right in the center of that and had an opportunity to speak to a lot of large celebrities and management companies and people who are just trying to rush into the space.
Right.
And I felt a large degree of responsibility to introduce people into the space in the right way. And I think there's a lot of short-term opportunities, as we all know, in crypto. And I think a lot of influencers and creators have taken those short-term opportunities, and many of them are paying the price for that right now.
Right.
So I think, just we have a very long-term view on where value gets created in the social token space. We are capitalized so we can play the long term, and just want to make sure that we fight for the opportunity to introduce creators into the space in a way that I think will do them the most service over the long run. And for most of them, it means being much more thoughtful about how they launch tokens, much more thoughtful about when they launch tokens, and with whom they do it. So whatever opportunities I have to come speak with folks like yourself that have an audience, or speak in conferences, events, various, throwing our own events, those are things that we want to do, because I think we're still at this inflection point right now where we can have a pretty big impact on the future, through being active and trying to champion a worldview that we believe to be more correct or more useful to the folks that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. I also agree wholeheartedly with your view. I believe that communities are definitely underrated. I think it has much more potential value, but in the right way, right? And we have to really, be careful in what tools we choose, what ways we choose. So yeah, I'm in that phase as well, but would love to talk to you more about that later on, in another separate conversation. But thank you so much for your time. I mean, it's been a great pleasure to learn about, what you're building and what your vision is, and, what's coming up next, and in the scene. So thank you so much for your time. And, please come to Asia, as soon as COVID is lifted.
Yes.
I'd love to, invite you, because it's I think we all need this, your insight. We all need to learn from your insights. And thank you so much for your time.
I look forward to traveling again. So I hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks.